So that's called augmented mallets by a company called Arturia. And this particular episode is called Critical Mass Time. What does that mean? Critical mass. So critical mass comes from, in physics, what you need to make a nuclear explosion. There's a critical mass of fissionable material, and when it gets together and it's not controlled, then your power station melts down. And we've seen examples of that. Or if you don't want it to be controllable, then it could be an atomic bomb. But critical mass has sort of escaped from the physicists' control into the public at large. And people seem to know that critical mass means you have enough stuff to do the thing you're trying to do. It doesn't have to be to blow something up. It doesn't have to be to make a power plant. What's the critical mass to make something happen? So, as a composer, when I first started the conservatory, they said, use a pencil and a paper, pretend computers don't exist. And they felt like that was enough of a critical mass of tools for a composer to do their thing. All you needed was a pencil and paper. And it is technically true. But before the printing press invented, there were books also, but they cost a lot more and they took a lot longer to make copies. So the printing press kind of freed things up. Well, composers got a break when scoring software came into being, so that if you wanted to make another copy of a part for the third violinist and the second viola player, you could press a few buttons, make some changes, ship it out, and deliver the goods. I am happy to say that as a musician and a composer and a performer, I have finally achieved a critical mass of tools. At least I think so this week. Maybe I will have GAS in the future, gear acquisition syndrome. But at the moment, I already have more tools to accomplish what I want to do than I actually have time to figure out how to use. So it would be a complete and total waste of time to accumulate more tools. It doesn't mean that I won't necessarily do it, but it means it's silly. A lot of you probably have the critical mass of what you need to do what you want to do. Woodworkers accumulate their chisels and their saws and their sanders, and car mechanics get their wrenches and screwdrivers, and musicians get a pile of instruments and a pile of software and a pile of keyboards and speakers. I would hazard the guess that anybody who's like 40 or 50 years old probably has the critical mass of all the stuff they need, because they've been accumulating it for the last 20 or 30 years. And although there's new stuff that comes out all the time, the new stuff is not necessarily better than the old stuff. And as I've spoken about before, having more stuff is not necessarily better than having less stuff. I did find the pencil and paper a little limiting at the conservatory, mostly because I'm very, very impatient and writing takes a long time. And I was hoping that the computer would teach me something about writing music, but unfortunately it didn't. So it took roughly 10 years since starting the conservatory to get the critical mass of tools and skills and patience and all the stuff that I needed to be a composer. And now that I have that, I have critical mass, then the question becomes, so what for, if nobody could hear it anyway? Which is why I created a few concerts, so there's now an excuse to compose. And except for the fact that I have worn out some of the keys on this computer and need to replace it, pretty much I have all of the software I need, and instead of using 100 apps, I could use 10. But now I know which 10 are the 10 that I need. So the critical mass is not just having enough stuff, it's having enough of the right stuff. You could have truckloads full of grapes and you're still not going to be able to make an atomic bomb. You need a critical mass of fissionable material. If you're a composer, you can have all the number 2 pencils and music paper you want in the world. You are not going to be able to deal with a symphony anymore. It's just, you have to write out the parts for 80 musicians, and then they make comments, and you have to change them, and you have to keep track. Way too complicated. But for a small ensemble, 4 or 5 people, using a laptop and a computer, I now have a critical mass. I'm not trying to write for an 80-piece symphony at the moment. And I'm mostly doing solo gigs. So for a single guy who plays with other people once in a while, you need a lot less stuff than what you had acquired to write for a symphony and to learn how to play a lot of instruments and to learn how to use a lot of apps. This is what I mean by critical mass. We should all be asking ourselves, do we have the critical mass to do what we need to do? My guess is yes, we do. And if we're blaming not getting somewhere because we need more stuff, pretty much that is never, ever true. Because the stuff that was around 40 years ago was good enough to do what we need to do. And if you think you need to get tomorrow's stuff, I played that dance many times in my life. I chased, this next rev of the app, this next chip will be fast enough, this next. What matters more is, are you ready? What determines critical mass more has to do with how do you feel. I could just have a marimba and do this. But this instrument actually has built-in 50 other patches, including all sorts of synth things. This is the preset that came with it. I never turned any of the knobs to do all the other things. It already has a critical mass. Its default setting is fun enough. Isn't that a great sound? That would take a pretty big marimba, a long one, 5-octave one, 2-3 octaves, not going to get that sound. Hey, that instrument has a critical mass of tonality and touch sensitivity that you could make music with it. And you don't need to get more. In fact, I don't even need to try the other billion settings that that single app has, because the first one kind of sounded okay. Maybe it would for you too. I bet you have critical mass.